Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the podcast. This is Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts, and we're going to talk about Phil and what makes him tick. So
what makes me tick?
Yeah, we're gonna
20 questions, huh?
That's right. We're gonna dissect actually not 20, only 5. So
okay.
Yeah,
we do have a limited show. We don't have an hour here. So.
We don't want to go too far. I mean, we could do an hour, but we could do whatever we want, right, with a podcast. But we try to keep it short and sweet so people can get on about their day and hopefully pick up a couple of useful nuggets along the way, and maybe it sparks some interest or whatever in thinking, hey, I need to talk about this, or you know what, I need to get it with an advisor, and maybe this is a good way for me to learn a little bit more about why they do what they do. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's
absolutely
a good way of thinking about it. So if you'd like to subscribe, don't forget, go to philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. You can find us on Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, YouTube, all that stuff. So let's peel back the curtain and reveal a little bit about Phil. When you were a young tax hack guy that shaped your view of money, wealth, that kind of thing. Parents, grandparents, who affected you?
Parents and grandparents. I mean, I would say first my parents. I was the first, I think, person in our entire family to actually complete college. My mom never went. My dad went for a few years, never completed it.
Okay.
His parents never went to college, but just seeing, some of the financial struggles and things they went through. I mean, looking at my parents, they went through all sorts of different ebbs and flows in their career before my dad finally got into a couple of different businesses that ended up working well for him and ended up working in real estate. I mean, that was his final stage in his life as he owned rental properties.
Okay.
Although I always joke with him, I said, it's because of seeing you go through that is why I don't own any rental properties, because they're a challenge.
That's an influence.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they're a challenge. But then, looking back even at my grandparents, my grandfather, they owned a farm, but he actually worked, and that was in northern Michigan. But he worked in a factory down here. Grandma and the kids would take care of the farm. He came back up on the weekends and worked the whole weekend on the farm. So,
oh, wow.
There was no weekends and, kicking back and enjoyment. It was back up working on the farm, catching up on things that, didn't get done and repairing stuff, and then down
different
at
type
the
of
factory
lifestyle
on Monday again.
Yeah,
so,
different type of lifestyle, different type of work ethic too. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Biggest lesson you might have taken from anything that you might have saw in that? Was it Grandpa's work ethic maybe that was the biggest lesson, or stay away from real estate?
Yeah, well, stay away from real estate, work ethic. It's probably because of my dad that I'm the entrepreneur I am. I've been an employee only early on in my career for a couple of CPA firms as I started, but always have had that entrepreneurial bug. So started my own practice really early on.
Okay. Nice.
When my second son was born. So, yeah. So, it's been in the blood, so to speak, of being that entrepreneur owning a business.
And that's a different mindset too, because my wife and I had that conversation for a number of years. I went back into the regular workforce and I wasn't happy. I was always an entrepreneur. And she's like, you're definitely not happy. She's like, so let's make that switch. For her, she's like, I can't do it. I don't possess. She's like, I find that too fearful. I'd rather work for somebody. And so everybody has that different thing about them. And some people just can't do the self-employed or the business type of thing. And it's harder for them. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's all about knowing yourself and what you're comfortable with. And there's pros and cons on both sides. Nothing wrong with either one of them. So.
Well, you mentioned working for yourself for a long time. So how'd you end up there? How did you end up in the financial business in general?
Well, I started out as a CPA. That's what my degree's in. Got a CPA, worked for a couple of larger CPA firms. Through all that, realized that I wasn't cut out for the corporate world and didn't like the, three partners. None of them liked each other. They hated each other. And, so I'm like, yeah, this is not the world I want to live in. So branched off on my own, started my own practice. As a CPA, grew that, had about 10 and a staff in our firm at one point. And then through that, started getting clients asking about helping them on the financial aspect. I have always had a focus on taxes, and helping minimize and save taxes, so they kept asking, why don't you just help us with the financial aspect of it?
Okay, so you moved from doing just the CPA aspect to doing both.
Yeah, so I did both for about 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And then came to a point in my career to said, okay, I can't do both and do them good. I had to pick.
Oh,
So at the end of it, I decided let's go ahead and transition over to financial services. I felt that I could enjoy that more, be more beneficial to clients,
hmm.
in that aspect of it. So transitioned over to full-time financial services. But I mean, what makes me different is I do have that CPA background. So we're always tax is a big focus of what we look at.
So, but you still are a
So,
CPA.
oh yeah, I never gave. I don't want to take that test again. So
Gotcha.
no, didn't want to give that up. So yeah, I'm
Okay.
still a licensed CPA, still do all the
So
education and
maintain
requirements
all
to
the
maintain
levels.
it. But
Okay.
yep.
Nice. Nice.
But now
Okay.
I'm just very focused in what I use that for.
Which I think
So
is a
yeah.
great,
So
it's a great piece to it, right? Because so much of your retirement plan success can revolve around the tax portion of it.
oh,
And
absolutely.
many advisors have a CPA in their office, and
Hmm.
some don't. Some just are like, well, this is what we do. And then you may want to consult with your CPA, and that
Right.
might be a fine fit for you. But me personally, I think that might be a nice little bonus to be like, hey, I've got this financial advisor who's also a CPA. So like every decision we're talking about has a tax slant right from the word go.
Yeah. And I mean, not to dog CPAs because I am one, right?
Right.
But it's the reality is, and I always joke with clients, if we're not helping them on the CPA side, is you've got to understand your CPA and the world they live in. And I always say it's like a horse with blinders on, right? So the world that a CPA typically lives in is
Mm,
last year, this year, and next. I mean,
right.
that is their entire world.
Right.
So when you start talking to them, well, let's look 10, 15, 30 years down the road, their head's going to blow up because that's just not what they're used to doing. They're going to call you absolutely crazy and you can't control that. What are you talking about? This is all you can control, which
Right.
we've had a lot of discussion on control and you're absolutely right. But you need to still have a plan. And I mean, the funny thing is with that is as I transitioned into it, in my early years as an advisor, when that's my primary focus,
Right.
I didn't believe in planning either. I thought it
Hmm.
was a joke. I said, yeah, you can't because of my CPA background.
That's wild. It's
But
it's
as
really
you
cool to
start getting
hear.
into it, you
Yeah.
realize, well, that's not reality. You have to look down the road and have a plan in place that it's
Right.
not going to happen exactly that way. But what does it look like? What can I control? How can I reposition things to make it all work?
So wait a minute, Phil. You're talking crazy here. So what you told me is basically that you learned something and you
Oh,
grew and
absolutely.
evolved. Wow, what a novel concept in
I
today's
did a
world,
complete
right?
180 on
Yeah.
my
Well,
my view of planning and
but what
yeah,
a concept, right? One of the things I think we're missing often is this, to say, hey, I was wrong and I learned something new and now I'm
yep,
embracing it, right? I think we
yep.
need to do that more as a society. And we won't get off into a tangent there, but that would go a long way to fixing things if people could just admit that, hey, you know what? I was wrong about something and I've
You don't
learned.
have
And
the only right answer. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, your worldview is not the only worldview, for sure. Okay, so anybody in the industry, maybe a good influence or somebody that puts you under the wing, so to speak, or just something that you took from someone.
Yeah, I guess a couple of industry experts, if you want to call them that, or whatever, that I followed is Ed Slott. So he's a CPA that actually works with financial advisors and helping educate them on taxes.
Right. Yeah.
So I was
He's a very
part of
big
his
name
group, did
in.
a lot of training under him, and learned a lot from him in improving, even as a CPA. My view on taxes and planning and how it all relates overall, not just looking at the current year, next year type of thing.
Right. I love the head
Michael,
blowing up though. The
yeah,
imagery
yeah,
is
it's like,
hilarious.
oh yeah, it's yeah. Well, and it's true. I mean, most CPAs they just don't get that.
Right.
It doesn't fit in their world. So
Stop. No head
yeah,
head will blow
yeah.
up. Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing? You can't do that. Even with all of these people, I mean, I use what I learn, take it with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
and then apply it to think, okay, how can we use this? Let's not just use here's the cookie cutter. It has to be this way. And unfortunately, I think a lot of financial advisors that have been trained as a financial advisor, you go through the education, the CFP, all this. Well, this is how it has to be
Mhm.
done. It's very
Right.
cookie cutter. And unfortunately, I think too many people get caught in that to
Yeah.
where
Very true.
that's a way of doing it, but there
Yeah.
are other options.
Was it?
So,
I can't remember if it was Shakespeare that said, like borrow from the best or something along those lines about stealing from the
Yep.
best and then repurposing it or whatever the case is. And I
Yep.
mucked that all up, I know, so I apologize if you're a Shakespeare fan, but whomever it was that said it. But I think that's a good way you're looking at it. You're talking about thinking about think outside your own box. You look to places for best practices, and then you kind of hopefully internalize that, and then kind of take that and make that a bit more of your own.
Yep.
Or put your own spin on it or whatever the case. And I think that's how we grow and kind of, blossom, if you will. All right, so here's going to be the toughie. Maybe not a toughie, but it could be a controversial or it's interesting. If you had a magic wand and you could fix something that drives you bonkers about the industry that you're in, what would it be? What's something that just drives you insane that you just don't understand?
I mean, it's probably those rules of thumb, right? I mean,
Okay.
there's a
Well,
hundred
we do a
rules
lot of
thumb when
those.
it
That's probably
relates
not
to-
good.
Well, but we talk about them, right?
Yeah.
And even when we talk about them, it's a rule of thumb is to me a good place to start, right? It's a general idea, and that's what it is. It's a rule of thumb, right? You're
Right.
kind of doing this. It's in the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark. Yeah.
It depends on how you want to approach retirement. If you're an in the ballpark rule of thumb type of person, I'm probably not the advisor for you because I'm not cut that way. I mean,
Okay.
I like to
That's
have
fair.
a plan and run the numbers and see how can we make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, once we have that in place, yeah, I'm not saying, hey, we're rigid. The plan doesn't call for that. Sorry, we can't do that.
Right.
No, but we've got to. I'm not going to wing retirement.
Right.
There's too many. There's too many things that can happen and go
Yeah.
wrong that you don't want to get to age 80 and realize, oh man, I did this wrong.
Yeah. Well, our word in the last podcast was nimble. I really like that one. So,
Right.
you like structure, but you can be nimble. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to have some structure. There's
Okay.
certain things you need to plan around and plan for. Social Security, pensions. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to make decisions that lock you in.
Right.
So you need to run the numbers to see how does it work? What's the right option? But beyond that, I mean, there's got to be flexibility built into a plan because we live in a world that changes every day.
Every single day.
I mean, taxes are one of those things that, I mean, they had been somewhat steady for quite a few years, not a lot of big changes, but wow, in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of change.
And more
it's
coming.
On the hot burner still. So, I mean, things are changing. So,
You said something a second ago. You said, I'm not going to wing retirement. Fantastic. Okay. So you wouldn't wing your own, right?
right.
And so, as a fiduciary and just as a responsible adult and human,
Yep.
you're not going to wing somebody else's retirement. So, with that said,
No.
final question: what's the most gratifying part to your job? Because what you do at the end of the day, whether we're having a fun episode or a technical episode or whatever it is that we're talking about, what you do is actually very serious business because it's dealing with people's life savings, right? And so it's not to be taken lightly, even though we want to keep it fun and open and approachable. With that kind of said, what's the most gratifying thing in your job? What do you get the most excitement out of?
Helping them see that retirement actually works. And I mean, ideally, if it works even better than what they thought. I mean, perfect example. I'm working with a new planning client. We just met yesterday for our first meeting, our planning meeting, and run through the numbers. And I mean, she's a widow. She widowed a couple of years ago. Her hopes was that she could retire next year at 68.
Okay.
But she also said in our first meeting, I'd really like to just work part-time if I could.
Okay. Right.
So we ran the numbers, and I mean, 68 works. In fact, we ran the numbers, and you could retire tomorrow if you wanted. So to me, that is
always
gratifying.
great.
I love that because it now gives her that relief to and you could just see the stress drop to say, oh, okay,
Tomorrow.
So if I have a bad day, I mean, I can go in and say I quit. I said, yeah, you can. You're done if you want to, and that is retirement to me. And we talked about that before. It's not retirement. Isn't my last day on the job and now I transition into I'm not working anymore. It could be. Maybe that's your version, but retirement is knowing that at this point, work is an option. I work when, if I want to, on what I want to.
Yeah.
So I mean, if your current career is way too stressful and you no longer enjoy it, maybe that means you don't work at all, or maybe it means you transition and do something else part-time.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case because it's like, okay, again, it's very serious business because you're dealing with someone's, their life savings and everybody's situation is going to be different. And there's all these things we always talk about, these cliche-isms of the industry. But I imagine being able to present somebody with something and saying, hey, check this out. You're good to go. It's got to be pretty cool, right?
No, it doesn't happen that way all the time. But I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what the scenario is, we always come up with a workable plan.
Right, right,
Sometimes that first meeting isn't good, and it's a matter of, 68 probably isn't going to work. Unless here's the options, right? I mean, if you
right.
want that to work, maybe we've got to adjust and reduce your spending a little bit or modify some things,
Well,
right?
even the
So,
flip side, though, I would still think could be gratifying because then you're like, hey, listen, 68's not going to work. But
right.
if we do these couple of things here, we can get you there by 70, or whatever the
Yes.
case is. And then as you're working together, right, and the time goes by and all of a sudden, then the day comes and you're like, hey, we're here,
Yep.
right? So either way, you still kind of get them to that moment where
Right.
they can finally go, whew, good. I can
Yep.
relax or take off the stress or whatever the case is. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a scary thing, in the transition.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we talk so much on the show, and it's important, though, folks, retire to something and not just, like, well, I'm done. Now what?
It's a Saturday, and it's been a Saturday for the last 6 months, and
Right.
I don't know what to do anymore, and I'm bored. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have some. What is, and that's a discussion we have all the time. What does it look like to you? What do you want to do in retirement? What's that vision?
Exactly. All right. Well, there you go. So that's what makes Phil tick a little bit. And I'll ask you a fun one and a favorite hobby.
Favorite hobby? Probably camping. I mean, we talked about that. We were out camping on a couple of the episodes. So yeah, It's we love camping, getting out. Now, I got to preface, camping isn't in a tent on the ground. That's not our version of camping. It's
you glamp.
We glamp, exactly. We've got to travel for fifth wheel, so we've got a rolling hotel, if you want to think of it that way. But but being out in the nature, having that campfire, walking the dog, going down to the beach, it's fun.
Okay.
Meeting other people, it's a lot of fun. So,
well, that's our getting to know you episode, or what makes your advisor tick, whatever you want to call it. So hopefully that, you found that a little useful. And hey, and when you're looking for someone to work with, that can go a long way. We talk often about the warm fuzzies, and it's a two-way street, so,
absolutely.
Doing the podcast and talking with folks and, getting folks to come in, it's not always going to be this is the right fit for you. Phil just said it earlier. Hey, if you're looking for this type of advisor, that might not be me. I might not fit into that, that typically that kind of box. So you're looking for the right fit for you, and they're looking for the right fit for them, and little things like this maybe help along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, YouTube, so on and so forth. All of that stuff is found and very easy for you to do by just simply going to philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. Just click on and go to the website. Usually that information is in the show notes there on whatever app you're listening to, and then you can see ways to subscribe or share or whatever, and it's all very, very easy for you to do. Thanks for your time as always. Have a great day, folks. Take care of yourself, stay safe and sane, and don't forget to subscribe to us here on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.